Welcome to On the Money. I'm Mark Hamrick. So happy to be joined today by real rock star personal finance, Jean Chatzky. Jean, I feel like you've been an almost omnipresent personality and valuable content provider, an expert really. Tell me about HerMoney and why it is that you decided really to focus on helping to lift women and their relationship with their personal finances.
It's been a bit of an evolution for me over the years, and it's nice to be with you. First of all, Mark, thank you so much for the invitation. I um, I came out of financial journalism, have worked for pretty much every personal finance magazine on the planet, spent 25 years at the Today Show. And as I was looking toward my future, I realized that when I'm with an audience of all women, the conversation is different. The conversation is a little more honest and more free flowing, and we feel able and empowered to ask all the questions that we want to ask and to share all of our resources as women do so generously and so well. And I decided to build a home for that kind of information. HerMoney Media, which is the parent company of HerMoney.com and the HerMoney podcast, the newsletters that we produce, our Facebook group, it's all designed to provide a judgment-free zone where women can take in the information that we really need to have about our personal finances. And if there was ever any doubt, the way that this pandemic has set women back on our heels, I think just underlines the point that this information is needed more than ever.
Was this an evolution in your awareness, Jean, from the standpoint of in the earlier part of your career, you were just trying to help, in a sense, everybody, and then over time you focused in?
Yeah, and at the risk of putting myself on the couch, at age 40, I got divorced, I lost my father, I got fired from Money Magazine, and I turned 40. And all of those things combined made me take a really good, hard inward look at my own life and my own finances and why I ran my money the way I did. And I emerged wanting to help other women become stronger as I became stronger. So that was when I wrote my first book for women, specifically about money, called Make Money, Not Excuses. Most recently, I've written a book called Women with Money, and it's been a real evolution for me. The podcast, the HerMoney podcast, which is a top 1% podcast, I'm very, very proud to say, has actually been around for 5 years. HerMoney, the company's only been around for 2, but we've done 250 shows with incredible newsmakers and have really built this community that I just love being a part of.
Going back to the earlier part of your career, Jean, were you always passionate about personal finance, or was it, as it has been with many of us, where it's something that sort of overtook our lives? It was something that we just felt as if it's something that we were born to do, even though we didn't know it in the earlier part of our lives.
Yeah, I think it's the latter for me. I wanted to be a journalist coming out of college, capital J journalist. And the job I got was as the editorial assistant to the business editor at Working Woman magazine, which no longer exists. We have a very proud alumni network, but I was able to do stories on companies, write about careers, do some investing coverage. And I realized that the fact that I was kind of a math geek in high school played very handily into this. I loved the part of the story where I realized that numbers actually made it stronger. And so when I had the opportunity to take a turn and focus solely on personal finance and helping people in that way, that made a lot of sense for me. I also think for me, though, I mean, I'm an English major, right? I did not come at this through being an economist or getting a degree in finance. I did spend a couple of years on Wall Street just to get my chops, just to understand what I was talking about. But I learned personal finance through the lens of being a journalist. I still have, because I'm still writing for HerMoney and for AARP. I had this incredible ability to pick up the phone and to talk to the smartest people on any subject, which is just, I mean, if you ask anybody who really knows me how I prefer to spend my days, I still like to spend them reporting. I still like to be on the phone with the people at the universities, the academics who are doing the research, who have something new to say that can help us change our lives. And so as I learned that and digested it, I was able to explain it in plain English. And I think that's sort of been the secret sauce.
You and I have that absolutely in common because my training is as a journalist. And, one of the great things going back for me in the 1980s, going back to the 87 Wall Street crash, was just being able to get people on the phone and basically being a dummy and saying, please explain this to me. Right. We're given permission to do that
Yeah.
in those settings.
And I think that's one of the things that I try to convey to the women in my audience these days, that there is no shame in asking questions. I mean, anybody who sat at the desk next to me at Smart Money Magazine will tell you, I spent a lot of time saying, back it up. I don't understand it. Can you explain it another way? Because I couldn't write about it. I couldn't talk about it on the Today Show if I didn't really, really understand it first. And so I was going to ask all my questions to the point of, I'm sure, frustrating a lot of sources until I really got it.
So let's talk about where we are and maybe the status quo with women and their personal finances. And obviously, we're talking about the largest gender cohort in our society. So, there's not a one size fits all there. But what are the lessons that you think broadly women need to take to heart here? And ultimately, I think probably there's a lot of these that can apply to all of us.
Oh boy, there's so many actually. I think just to take a step back from that question, if you don't mind,
Sure.
I think women have to understand that because um, societal norms and the gender pay gap have persevered for so long, it's not enough for us to keep pace with men in terms of, in particular, their savings rates. We have to do better. And we have to do better because we're the ones who are going to earn less still. And this pandemic has set the gender pay gap back. We are the ones who consistently take breaks from work to care for kids and to care for older parents. As a result, when we get to retirement, we end up with less money in our retirement accounts, and then we have to make that money last longer because we outlive our male spouses by generally around 5 years. So, we have all of those factors working against us. We have a lot of things working in our favor. We're really good investors once we get ourselves to the table. We have a confidence problem. And we don't step up to invest as often as we should. We leave far too much money when we have it in cash compared to men. We need to put it to work. But once we get there, the fact that we like to do our research, the fact that we're willing to be a little patient, like that bodes very, very well for our ultimate returns. So it's nothing that we can't do. It's just we may have to fake it till we make it a little bit, because waiting years, particularly at the start of a career, to get going really hurts us down the line.
The timeline's much longer, don't you think, than many people have in mind?
Yeah, my husband and I have a financial advisor that we see together, and we were at our last meeting sort of debating the ages that you have to plug into those calculators. Do you use 95 anymore? I mean, 90, we gave 90 up a long time ago. Do you use 95? Do you use 100? The pandemic notwithstanding, and I know it's taken down longevity on a national scale, average wise, but um, you have to plan on on out on your money outliving you, even if you're not exactly confident that that bet is going to work out for you.
Yeah, the good news is you're going to live a long time. The bad news is you're going to live a long time.
Yeah. And you're going to live healthier than
Yes,
you ever
absolutely.
lived before. And you're going to
Yes.
want to do things that previous generations of retirees didn't do. And we're seeing, I think, in the way that people are looking at and looking for financial products, a shift in just acknowledging that maintaining some level of comfort, even if it's not excess during those later years, is an important part of a financial plan. I mean, we spent so many years at in the personal finance world talking about accumulate, and it is still a really, really important conversation, no doubt. But the other end, the decumulation conversation, the withdrawal conversation, is just as complicated, and it doesn't happen often enough.
Obviously, you provide valuable financial information to your audiences, and you just talked about the fact that you work with a financial professional. At what point do we need not to make this a do-it-yourself situation, whether it's someone who's starting out in their career in their management of finances, or perhaps not even having a career, or maybe there's someone that stays at home. And then there are those of us who are closer to the end of our careers than the beginning. What's your take on what kind of professional advice we should solicit?
Well, let's just distinguish for a second between having an advisor and getting some advice. When my first husband and I were about to buy our first home, we sat down with a financial advisor to talk about how much money we could actually afford to spend on this home. It was one and done. We got some advice. And it was a meeting that was well worth paying for, because it set us on the road to to doing this in the right way. But it wasn't a traditional advisory relationship. And I think there are many ways to get advice. And you may want to get advice from a person rather than from a website. You may want to pick up the phone if you work at a company where you have a 401k. Chances are you have access to somebody on the other end of that phone where you can ask some questions, and you may be able to ask those questions for free. And that is a fine thing to do, or to hire an advisor for an hour of their time to make sure that you're, as you have a baby, setting up the college savings program in the right way. I think people need to put their relationship, to more formalize their financial relationship with an advisor, when they feel there is a reason why they can't do it themselves on a consistent basis, or they won't do it themselves on a consistent basis. And there are a lot more of the latter than there are of the former, right? If we put in the work, could I do this myself? Yeah, I think I could do this myself, but I'm really busy. I do not have, could I make the time? Okay, maybe I could make the time, but I would rather use my time to do other things. I would, and for that reason, I have an advisor. It's, for me, it's a decision that I am not going to do this on a day-to-day basis, but that somebody needs to do it on a day-to-day basis.
Great points there. I think about the fact that when we're selling or buying a home, I think it's money well spent typically to use a real estate agent or realtor, because it's such a complicated business. I want to pivot to your book, Jean, because I feel like that's going to be another source of great information for people, along with your website. Your latest book is titled Women with Money, The Judgment-Free Guide to Creating the Joyful, Less Stressed, Purposeful, and Yes, Rich Life You Deserve. That's an interesting concept that or multiple concepts you put in there. And one of the things that I wonder how we balance when we're talking about personal finances is trying not to be sort of the advocating for the lifestyles of the rich and the famous, but to approach money as something that ultimately is something we have to have just to manage our lives. How do we balance that?
I always come back to the studies on money and happiness. And I actually think that during this pandemic, we have really learned a lot more about what we truly value and what is unnecessary. But this body of research basically shows that once you have achieved a level of comfort where you can pay your mortgage, make your car payments, pay for your health insurance, put food on the table, go on vacation every once in a while without worrying, more doesn't make you more happy. And as we look toward our lives, as we look to what we want our limited pool of financial resources to do for us, I think that's an important concept to keep, just to keep at the tip of your brain. I mean, when we look at the pandemic, I mean, the interesting thing in this K-shaped recovery is that people who have held on to their jobs and been able to invest are doing spectacularly well. The savings rate is double what it was as we went into this pandemic. It popped significantly higher and has come back down. And I expect it will pop again with this latest round of stimulus. But it, we, I think now know emergency funds are not an option. They are a necessity. There are a lot of things that we previously spent money on that we do not really need to or even want to spend money on in the past. We've learned some new habits, and going forward, keeping our own compasses pointed in the right direction as society opens up a little bit. We have the ability to travel, to do some of those things that have felt like pent up. Watching that is going to be important.
I just want to say, you are such an inspiring story and as well as an enlightening personality and expert. I just want to thank you so much for taking time to be with us here.
Oh, well, thank you so much for asking. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on the Money, Gene. For all of you out there, thank you for joining us and take good care.